Spider-Man No Way Home. Spoilers. Okay, so the movie it picks up immediately after the ending events of Spider-Man Far From Home, where Mysterio is being attacked by Spider-Man and Spider-Man disables the drones. And to me, it kind of reminded me of Infinity War, where during the opening credits of, the Marvel logo, there's that distress call. And in this, there's Mysterio relaying the message to the world that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. So at the beginning, I was like, okay, is this movie taking this seriously or is this supposed to be fun? So I was a bit confused of what the tone was from the very beginning because, as we know, the first two Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, Homecoming and Far From Home, have like this lighthearted tone to it and it's not 100% serious. But with this, I was confused from the beginning. I was like, are they trying to take this seriously or are they trying to make this funny? But I feel like there's it's not a balancing act, but I feel like the movie definitely holds its own with, even though the tones aren't they're not all over the place, but they're definitely it's definitely an emotional roller coaster ride because at the beginning, you hear Quentin Beck, Mysterio talking to, hey, Spider-Man's Peter Parker, picks up after the end of Far From Home, and he's swinging around with MJ, and then everyone's, in Peter Parker's life trying to figure out what's going on. And there's this one scene where Peter and MJ go to his apartment, his Marissa Tomei, Aunt May's apartment, and then go in there, and immediately, this is like, oh my god, this is one of the best scenes in the movie, is where it's just one shot. It looks like entirely one take where we're following Peter, and it puts me in their perspective. It puts me in their environment. It puts me in their environment during their emotional turmoil, where we're following Peter and the camera's just following him and then following all this chaos, and we learn that Happy Hogan and Aunt May aren't dating anymore, which is kind of sad because as soon as Aunt May was just like, yeah, it's not working out, and then John Favreau was like, yeah, okay. It reminded me of Swingers. I was like, oh, this guy can't catch a break. I felt bad for him because it just made me think of Swingers. Like, they definitely need to make a sequel to that. But I felt bad for him. I was like, oh, that's sad. And then just the scene, the way it's executed is just, mwah, it's masterful filmmaking. And a lot of these movies, I guess that's the most popular thing now, is doing everything in one shot. Because the movie is just one take. It's just one take of them in the house, following Peter in this situation, absorbing all this chaos, and them just being aware of what's happening. Like Happy Hogan and Aunt May aren't even aware of what's going on outside until they turn on the news. Then they turn on the news, and then they see these helicopters surrounding the apartment, and they're like, is that outside? And they look, and then now everyone knows Peter's Spider-Man, and they think he's a murderer. And then there's like a funny scene where Peter and MJ go to their high school, and then the gym teacher, the principal, and some other teacher, I forgot his name, are, one of the guys are like, yeah, you're a murderer. And then the other guy's like, no, we made a shrine for you. And the other guy's like, oh, no, I don't think you did it, and all this kind of stuff. So it's basically, to me, giving us the perspective of someone who's famous, of someone who is like in the limelight all the time, and they have paparazzi following them, and they got just rabid fans, doing weird things every now and then that are just kind of bizarre. And Peter, he just wants to live a normal life. He's a high school student. He's got a girlfriend. He's got a best friend. He just wants, to go to college, have a normal life, and be with his girlfriend and not have all this chaos. And so now his identity is exposed. He can't have that. So then, he's on the roof with his girlfriend, just like, can we go somewhere where we can just be away from people and stuff? And he's overwhelmed by it. But then there's this other element in the story where Peter is supposed to he and his friends are supposed to, it's Ned, who kind of feels like a third wheel. Like Ned, there's this funny scene where MJ and Peter are on the roof and they're just hanging out. and MJ's reading this magazine about these Spider-Man rumors, like, oh, he can hypnotize women with his eyes and all this ridiculous stuff. And then Ned is like the third wheel. He comes out of nowhere, like, yeah, we'll be best friends forever and all this stuff. And it's just like kind of awkward, like, yeah, you're the odd man out. And then, they're all planning to go to MIT together after they graduate high school. And it's heartbreaking because then there's this scene where MJ's at a diner. I think she works at a diner. I don't know if they established she works at the diner yet, but they're at this diner, and then they get their offer letters for MIT, and then they read them all at once. And in my mind, I was thinking, because you see Ned's like the acting in this movie from everybody's phenomenal. Like Ned in this movie, you see his facial reaction, and you immediately see the disappointment on his face where he's like, oh, I didn't get accepted. And so I'm like, okay, Ned didn't get accepted. MJ and Peter probably got accepted, but then the reality is that none of them got accepted because they're all associated with Spider-Man. And Spider-Man's public enemy number one because they think that he's a menace, because he killed Mysterio and he caused all this chaos. So since people know that, Peter Parker's Spider-Man, and anyone associated with Peter Parker is not going to get a fair shake in life. So his best friend Ned and his girlfriend MJ don't get to go to college because they're associated to Peter Parker. And then Peter feels bad about this because he's like, man, all this is my fault. I just want you guys to have a good life and whatever. So then he has this idea to go see Doctor Strange. And it's a very interesting scene because he looks at, because they establish these Halloween decorations where MJ's boss comes out and he's like, you need to take down these Halloween decorations. So they mention it. And then, she's like, okay, I'll get to it. And then they learn, the disappointment that they didn't get into MIT. And then she goes back to work. And then Peter looks at the Halloween decorations and it kind of reminds him of Doctor Strange and the facial expressions on Tom Holland's face. Like, he doesn't say anything. You just see it on his face. Like, the directing and the editing in here is fantastic because they cut to these Halloween lights that look like Doctor Strange, and then they cut to Peter's face, and he has this idea on his face, this look on his face where he's like, I can talk to Doctor Strange. And so there's very great acting, very great editing, very great directing here in a lot of these scenes. So then he goes to see Doctor Strange, and the music is great. Like when we see the Sanctum in New York, with the camera following Peter from behind, and then the shot of the Sanctum comes in, and it's this big house, and it looks epic, and then the music is playing. It feels like some fairy tale music, so it really puts me in the mood. And then Peter goes into the Sanctum, and then they're talking about, oh yeah, there's the snow here because of something I don't remember, but whatever. And then Doctor Strange comes in rocking this jacket, which looks cool, but then come to find out it's just a blue jacket with his cape on it, but it still looks cool with his cape on it. But so, Doctor Strange is like, how may I help you? And then Peter's like, oh, everyone knows that I'm Spider-Man, and he wants to help his friends out. He's being selfless. He's like, I want my friends to be able to go to college. They can't go to college because they're associated with me, and I want to, help them. And so Doctor Strange, he recommends the spell. Where in the trailer, Wong is like, don't cast that spell. But in the movie, Wong doesn't care. Wong is like, fine, you can do it, because he's convinced that it actually works, because Doctor Strange mentions to Wong that, well, have you remembered all of these, parties that we had? And he's like, no, I haven't. So it's like, yeah, we've used it before. So Peter convinces Doctor Strange to use the spell to make everyone forget that he's Spider-Man. So then Doctor Strange is casting this spell, and the special effects look 100% believable. Like in my mind, as I was watching the scene, I was looking at Benedict Cumberbatch, who plays Doctor Strange, and I was like, these hand movements that he's doing, without the CGI there, it looks like he's just doing these silly things. But then with the CGI there, it's like, man, this is some mystical stuff. So the CGI is just superb in this movie. And then as Doctor Strange is casting the spell, he's like, no one will remember that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. And then Peter, as you see in the trailer, Peter's like, well, what about MJ? I want her to remember that I'm Spider-Man, because she's my girlfriend. Or what about Ned, because he's my best friend. What about Aunt May, because she's, like she's like a surrogate mother to me. She raised me, So he's like bringing up all these people, and Doctor Strange is like, okay, you know what? You're not supposed to do this while I'm casting the spell. You're annoying me right now, And then you can't change certain things in the spell while I'm casting it. And so the funny thing is that I noticed with Doctor Strange in this movie is that he does a lot of things that he says never to do. Because at first he's like, well, we can't cast a spell because something like they say in the first Doctor Strange movie where he's like, usually the bad things come after the spell or something like that. You cast the spell, but you don't know the consequences of the spell. And then he says, well, while I'm performing this spell to make everybody forget that you're Spider-Man, you can't change certain things about the spell while I'm casting it, but yet he does it anyway, So it's like he wasn't supposed to do it, but he does it to help out Peter. And then he changes certain things about the spell while he's casting it, even though he just said not to do that. So there's a whole bunch of things he goes against his own words throughout the movie. But then, Peter constantly wanting to change the spell as Doctor Strange is casting it, it causes a rift in the space-time continuum. And so then, this ripple effect happens, and special effects are great. Ripple effect happens, and so then the multiverse opens. And so then all of these creatures start appearing. It feels like a horror movie. Like all these creatures start appearing, and Doctor Strange is like, oh, we need to close this portal and all this stuff so these people can't come here. So then he closes it. And then the funny part is where Peter's like, well, I just wanted you to help me, because my friends, I really want them to go to MIT and they can't because of me. And, maybe I could have called them or something. And Doctor Strange, he's like, are you telling me that you came and asked for my help and all you did was read the letter? You didn't even call these people to see if you can get a second chance, and you've been here wasting my time this entire time. So it's kind of funny. And then he kicks Peter out of the sanctum, and then Peter, is just like, okay, going about his life. And there's a moment in the movie where Peter, he talks to, I forgot the character's name. Flash. He talks to Flash, and Flash, he doesn't really have a whole lot to do in this movie. He's there and then he disappears. Like Flash is this guy. He's like, I'm friends with Spider-Man, and he's not. He's been the bully to Peter this entire time, and now that Peter is famous and everyone knows that Peter's Spider-Man, now he's like, oh, he and I have been best friends all along, when that wasn't the case. And then he's also trying to get rich off of Peter and all that knowledge, and he's promoting a book, which I thought was pretty funny. And there's a point where Peter calls Flash, and he's like, you know what? Tell me who that lady was, who's in charge of all that MIT stuff. And then Flash, and Peter work out a deal, which doesn't come to fruition in the movie, but we see his obligation come to fruition with that. And then there's this bridge sequence which is really intense, where Peter goes to confront the lady, and she's like, you're just standing here in the middle of the highway. And he starts talking to her, and then that's when this chaos happens, where Doc Ock comes out, and he starts attacking people. And like it's nostalgia, because we're seeing Doc Ock from an older Spider-Man movie come in here, but it makes sense because the multiverse and all of these characters, basically it's people who know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, or people who know Peter Parker as Spider-Man come into the MCU's reality. And so Doc Ock shows up, and he's like, where's my machine? The power of the sun in my hands. And so then he and Peter have a fight. The visual effects are amazing. I can see everything that's happening. The stakes are really high at this point. And Peter just gets out of the situation by the skin of his teeth, because Doc Ock has him pressed up against this pillar, and he's about to go for the killing blow. But then he takes off his mask, and Doc Ock's like, you're not Peter Parker, and then so he's like, what are you talking about? And then when Doc Ock grabs a hold of Peter's chest, the nanotechnology comes off of Peter and goes onto Doc Ock's tentacles. And so he gets a little upgrade there. But then seeing as how that technology goes to Doc Ock, Peter is able to control that technology and therefore disable Doc Ock's tentacles. So that's how he gets out of that situation, which is kind of like, okay, he had to get out of it somehow, but it makes sense. It was cool. I'm glad that the scene was executed the way it was. And so he captures Doc Ock, and then the Green Goblin comes in. We hear the laugh, and then the bomb come in, and the explosion, and it's Green Goblin. And then after that, we see William Dafoe, and he's still dealing with the voices in his head, and his helmet talking to him, and he's going crazy, and then he runs away. And at this point in the movie, when we see William Dafoe talking to Marissa Tomei and Aunt May, and he's asking for help, I was thinking in my head, something's gonna go wrong here. Something's clearly gonna go wrong here. Like, the as an audience member, I know the guy's insane. The characters in the movie don't know that he's insane. So he's gonna break at some point. He's gonna show his true nature at some point. Like, is he really being sincere, or is he, just playing a part? That's what I was confused. I was like, something's brewing underneath the surface. Things as an audience member, things are gonna go wrong. You just don't know how it's all going to be executed. And so there's a lot of suspense. And then there's a funny moment too where William Dafoe's talking to Marissa Tomei like, I need help, and it's like, I even feel for the guy, even though I know he's evil. I'm like, I even feel for him, like, oh man, he really just wants to, be normal and just be a healthy guy and whatnot. But then there's this funny moment where Marissa Tomei and Tom Holland are talking face to face, and then in the background, in a blurred shot of William Dafoe, you can see him grabbing this box of donuts and then putting the donuts in his pocket, then looking at them, and they don't notice that he's taking the donuts. So it's like lots of funny stuff here. And Doctor Strange shows up, and he's like, all of these people from all of these different dimensions have showed up, and they're all trying to take you out, and we need to capture all of them to send them back to their realities and stuff. So then Peter, he gets this new suit, which looks pretty cool. And then that's when we meet Electro later on in the movie, and Electro shows up, and he's still in his blue form, but not all the way. And then, Jamie Foxx, he doesn't look like the character that he was in the Amazing Spider-Man movie. He looks different, and they even mention that in the movie that he looks different. But it was a bit of an awkward scene, because then it's like, he's standing there, and he's like, well, y'all just aren't going to say anything about me standing here being naked and whatnot, and Peter gives them some clothes, and then they put each of the villains inside of they bring them to the sanctum and put them inside these chambers and lock them all up. And then when you count them all, you got Sandman there, you got Electro, and you got Doc Ock, and you have Green Goblin. So wait, no, there's more villains that. You have Green Goblin, you have Doc Ock, you have Sandman, and Electro, and Lizard, and then the Lizard's there. So you have the Sinister Five, even though it's supposed to be the Sinister Six. You have the Sinister Five there. So I guess Sony, trying to create their Sinister Six movie, they eventually got 5 members. But hey, eventually they got that adapted onto the big screen. And so, all of these villains from all these dimensions show up, and they all serve a purpose. They're all, there's lots of great one-liners in this movie, because even Doc Ock, he says this one line where he's like, you're fighting Ghost. Like Peter, the thing that I love about this is that, Peter's not out to kill these villains. Like so many superhero movies you see, there's the villain, and then at the end of the movie, the hero fights the villain, and the villain dies. And then that's it. And, you move on to the next movie, and it's the same formula. But with this, there's a bit of nuance to it, because Peter, he's just a high school kid. Like they say, with great power comes great responsibility. And so his aunt is like, when she sees William Dafoe, she's like, this guy's begging, he's pleading for our help. Everyone deserves a second chance, even if they're a villain or whatever. And so Peter, he's like, I don't want to kill these guys. I want to give these guys a new life. where Doctor Strange is like, it's their fate to die, you know? And so when Doc Ock comes in and he's like, you know, so you want to go out and you want to go out there and fight Ghost, you know, these people like Doc Ock, he died in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movie. Electro, he died in the Amazing Spider-Man 2. So all of these people are supposed to be dead, and Doctor Strange is like, that's their fate. Their fate is to die. And then Peter's like, well, what if there's another way? So it makes sense because, you know, his Aunt May implemented or planted that seed into his mind to make him want to save these people, where Doctor Strange is like, no, this is going to mess with the fabric of our reality. We need to send these people back where they came from. And so there's that moral dilemma there. It's like, do you save these people or do you let these people die, even though they're villains, you know? And so it's like, I'm on both sides. I'm like, I'm on Peter's side, where it's like, yeah, you know, morally the right thing, that even though they're villains, they still have a chance at life. And then it's like Doctor Strange is like, no, you can't. They're villains, you know. Their fate is to die. They're already dead, basically. So I was like, I was on both sides. And then Peter and Doctor Strange have their big fight. And then when Peter Parker and Doctor Strange have their fight, I cried. I was like, hold the visual effects, man. And then the music. Holy shit, the music, man. Like they like the visuals, man. When they're, I can't even explain it. It was insane. I was like, holy shit, this is what I've been wanting to see for a long time. Like, the visual effects were great. And then, but the strangest thing is when Doctor Strange, he pushes Peter into the astral plane. He pushes Peter out of his body, separates his spirit from his body. Usually that incapacitates the opponents, where it's like, okay, now you're out of your body, you're in the astral plane, you can't control your physical form anymore. But then for some reason Peter could still control his physical body. And even Doctor Strange is like, how are you doing this? And the movie doesn't explain that. And so the only thing I chalk it up to is, well, you know, they just cracked open the multiverse. And like Doctor Strange said, you know, the multiverse is something we know little about, so anything is possible. So even though they really didn't explain it, they kind of did. And I just go along with it. I'm just like, whatever. It's the multiverse. Anything's possible. I'm fine with it. Whatever. So then Peter was able to escape that situation. And, you know, and Doctor Strange is right. He was like, you know, how are you doing this? And I'm like, as an audience member, how are you doing this? It was the multiverse. So he gets out of it. And then he traps Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension, you know, where it's like it cuts everything off from reality. And they have their fight there, and then Spider-Man or Peter figures out the geometry of the mirror dimension and how to defeat Doctor Strange. So he uses his wits to get out of the situation. And Doctor Strange ends up being trapped there for about, he said 25 hours he was trapped in the mirror dimension, which I thought was funny. But then, so throughout the rest of the movie, Peter, you know, he's trying to save these villains' lives, you know. So there's this one scene where Peter takes the villains to Aunt May's condo, or to Jon Favreau's condo. And they go there, and it's very intense from the very beginning to the end, because they go there and Peter's trying to save each and every one of them. He's like, okay, I'm going to create something that can make you become whole again, that can make you be normal. You're not going to have your superpowers anymore, but you'll still be alive and be able to live a normal life. And, you know, some of the villains, like Jamie Foxx, he's really just like, nah, man, I just want ultimate power, man. I don't want to be cured and all this stuff. And then Doc Ock, you know, he's being controlled by his tentacles. He's like, you know, I don't want any part of this. So a lot of the villains are skeptical, but they go along with it because it's like either they're going to be sent back to their original dimensions and they're going to die because that's their fate, or, you know, Peter can try and save them and they can have a second chance at life. And then so, you know, Peter, he comes up with, you know, this idea, and then he saves Doc Ock by taking the chip off of his neck and bringing him back. And then, you know, Dr. Octavius comes back and he's like, oh, I feel normal again. And then it's at this moment where the directing again is fantastic, where Peter's spider sense goes off, and there's this camera angle where we're right in front of Peter's face. I don't know what you call it, but we're right in front of Peter's face, and we're following him, and we can hear his breathing, and we feel the anxiety as he's going through the room, like something doesn't feel right here, like something's wrong, and we don't know what it is. And then he confronts William Dafoe. And William Dafoe, man, is a fantastic actor. Like, this is a terrifying scene where Peter, he's trying to figure out what the problem is, and then he webs William Dafoe's hand to this statue, and then William Dafoe goes off the deep end. He says like just this fantastic one liner where he's just like, we're gods and we're gods and gods shouldn't be contained or something like that. So then that sets Electro off, and then he starts attacking people, and then there's all this chaos that's happening, and all the villains start to escape, and then Aunt May runs out of the room. And at first I was like, wait a minute, Aunt May, you're leaving Peter behind. But then it's like, I mean, what the hell, Peter, he's outnumbered. And then what the hell is Aunt May gonna do? She doesn't have any superpowers or anything, so she gets the hell out of there. And the entire time I'm thinking, where is everybody else inside of this condo? But she runs away, and it's a very intense action scene, because then after William Dafoe gives this intense speech, he starts attacking Peter, and Peter and Goblin start fighting, and then Electro attacks Octavius, and Octavius flies out the window where I thought he was dead. And the fight is intense, and then it reaches the lobby where Marissa Tomei's Aunt May and Tom Holland's Peter and William Dafoe's Green Goblin have a showdown. And William Dafoe, he's about to kill Peter. Like, Green Goblin, he has Peter by the neck, and he's like gonna kill Peter in front of Aunt May. So the movie, I think, gets a little dark. He's about to kill Aunt May. He's about to kill Peter in front of Aunt May. And then Aunt May is like standing there trying to hold her ground. And then Green Goblin's glider comes in and just knocks her, just like hits her in the back, and then she falls on the ground. And then I'm thinking at that point, okay, she's dead. And then Peter somehow gets out of the situation, and then Goblin escapes. And then, J. Jonah Jameson, played by J.K. Simmons, he shows up as the reporter, trying to report on everything and the chaos. And then Peter is with his aunt, and she gets up all of a sudden like nothing just happened. She's walking around like, oh, I'm fine and whatever. So I thought that was kind of odd. But then she collapses, and she falls to the ground, and then Peter, he's trying to comfort her, like, are you okay and stuff. And then he sees that she's losing a lot of blood and stuff. And this is, for me, at this point in the movie, is where it got really emotionally heavy. Because then, Peter starts crying, and he's like, everything's going to be okay. You're going to be all right. And then she's just like out of it, and she's just like, oh, I need to catch my breath. I'm okay. And then Aunt May dies in Peter's arms. So I respect this movie for actually killing a character, because most of the time, you see these superhero movies or these big action blockbusters, and they don't want to kill important characters, because they want to keep it lighthearted, because, I mean, mostly this stuff is for kids and stuff. But I enjoy a movie that can cater to adults and have adult themes, while also cater to children that can cater to the whole family. And with this, I feel that it goes both ways, because there's lots of emotional, heavy beats in this movie. Like, when Aunt May dies, I cried. I, like, just tears, like, just pouring down my face, bro. Like, it was sad, because, watching Aunt May's character throughout this trilogy, knowing how much she meant to Peter, and then watching her get killed by the Goblin nonetheless, because Goblin's supposed to be Spider-Man's arch nemesis, that just sets Peter off on this like vengeance quest, where he's just like, I'm gonna kill that guy. He killed the one person that was most important to me. And so Peter disappears, and then this is another great portion of the movie where, okay, so Ned has Doctor Strange's sling ring, and he's just like, oh, I wish Peter were here. So he opens this portal, and then this Spider-Man is standing there in this alleyway inside of this portal. And then they're like, oh, hey, it's Peter. Peter, come over here. So then Spider-Man comes through the portal. And it's not Tom Holland. It's Andrew Garfield. It's Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. And so it's like, we're bringing not only the villains from these other previous Spider-Man movies that are no way, shape, or form connected to the MCU. We're bringing all of these other Spider-Man. So basically, this is just Into the Spider-Verse, but the live-action version. Because then we even see Tobey Maguire come back from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. So we're bringing just all of the old, characters and villains from these Spider-Man movies into this one movie, and it makes sense. It makes sense because the the fabric of reality has been cracked, so now there's the multiverse, which makes sense, bringing all of these villains. And then the sling ring thing, I just accept it. I'm like, okay, it's fine, whatever. And it's a beautiful scene where Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield have a moment, and it's great. Like the whole thing is great. The way it's executed, it's great. It's believable. It makes sense. It's not just there for nostalgia. It's there and it serves the purpose of the story. And then so we get these beautiful moments where Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, they connect with each other. Basically, basic Spider-Man stuff where they're like, the whole thing with Spider-Man is that, like they say, with great power comes great responsibility. And so it's like he says, the loved ones in my life die, and I do the best that I can to protect the people that I love the most, and I don't want to see anyone get hurt, but it's like you can't really have everything that you want. It's like you protect the city, but you can't really have a love life. You can't have what you want, and so that's kind of sad dealing with Spider-Man, because like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield relate to that, because Tobey Maguire lost Uncle Ben, who died, and then Andrew Garfield lost Gwen Stacy, and that's a heavy point in the movie. So by the end of the movie, it deals with a lot of death, which I thought was like, damn, this movie's getting dark. Like this is supposed to be fun, and this is like some serious shit. It deal like the ending of the movie, like right after Aunt May dies. I think the movie deals a lot with death, and how to grieve with that. And so, and it's very emotional. And so then, when Toby and Andrew have their bonding moment as they reveal to themselves, to each other, that, hey, we're Spider-Man in our own dimensions, they say, well, there's a place that we always want to go to when we want to be alone. And so Andrew Garfield's like, oh, I go to this one location to be alone. And Toby's like, I go to this one location to be alone. So then that triggers something in Ned and MJ's mind to where, oh, where would Peter go? You know, Tom Holland Spider-Man, where would he go if he wanted to be alone? So they figured it out, and they find him, and he's just a wreck. He's this emotional wreck where he's crying because he lost Aunt May. So I really appreciated that they didn't just like kill Aunt May and then brushed it to the side like, oh, she's dead, let's move on. It was like, no, she died, and this was a very important person to him, and this is just like affecting him throughout the rest of the movie. So it really holds a lot of emotional weight, so I felt that. I really appreciated that. So like when characters die in movies, I want to feel that emotional weight. I just don't want them to brush it over. And so he's dealing with that turmoil. Then he meets, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, and they have their bonding moment. And there's this one moment where, you know, Peter is like talking to Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. He's like, you have no idea how I feel. I want to kill that guy. He killed Aunt May. You have no idea. And you look at Andrew Garfield in his face, and he's just like, bro, I know exactly how you feel. And as an audience member, I'm like, bro, if you just listen to him, like he lost someone close to him too. So all three of you have a deep connection that you don't understand. And so it was just emotional bonding, man. It was so beautiful. Like just that emotional bond between these three Spider-Men was fantastic. It was like, oh my god, it was epic. And so then, they create this plan to capture all of the villains and bring them all into one location. And he still wants to save their life after all of this chaos. Peter is like, I still want to save them. I don't want to kill them. And then so they come up with this grand plan at the Statue of Liberty, where they're turning the torch that the Statue of Liberty is holding, they're turning that into Captain America's shield, which I thought was funny. But he forces all the villains to go to this one location because he's like, hey, I could have killed all of y'all anytime I wanted by pushing this button, but I decided not to because I want to save you. So you come here and we can work this out. So then there's this moment where all three Spider-Men are having a conversation, and it's a beautiful moment because then like Andrew Garfield's character gets to reveal the loss that he had in his life. He's like, I lost my MJ. My MJ, she got killed, and all this, and it's affecting him, and so then Peter, Tom Holland relates to that, and then Tobey Maguire, he lost his Uncle Ben, so he relates to that. So they all lost somebody in their lives, and so I thought that was the real emotional connection there. And so as they're waiting, then they're just like, hanging out, talking, getting to know each other, which is very fun and cool. I enjoyed it. Then the villains come in, and it's just kind of, at first it's kind of just like, oh, just an action scene where it's like, oh, there's a lot of spectacle here. It's a fight, and it's fine, and eventually it's just kind of like, oh, this is just happening, because then as the Sandman, he's doing this tornado thing. The three Spider-Men, they just go inside this one area, and the tornado's still surrounding them, and then they come up with a strategy, because at first they're getting their ass whooped, which is like the movie, I think, kind of moves at a generic pace. It tells the story in a generic way, but at the same time, it's still special. It still has some gravitas to it. It still has some nuance to it, even though you can pretty much predict what's going to happen here. But yeah, they're like, they come up with a plan, and there's this funny part where Tom Holland, he's like, I've worked in a team before. I know how to work as a unit. I've been with the Avengers. And then Tobey Maguire, he's like, oh, that's great. What's the Avengers? So it's kind of funny, how they like, one Spider-Man's been through one thing, even though they're all Spider-Man, they all been through different experiences. And then so they come up with a plan to take out all the villains, and then they take them all out one by one, but then they heal them. They don't kill them, which I thought was very interesting. So they try to heal each and every single one of them. But there's this one bizarre moment where I can't remember which Spider-Man was about to get killed, but then Doc Ock comes in as Jamie Foxx is about to deliver the finishing blow. And then Doc Ock's like, oh yeah, I'll take over from here. And then it's like, wait a minute, bro. Didn't you just try to kill him? Like, didn't Electro just try to kill Doc Ock, and now you're trusting him? I just thought that was kind of weird. It's like, bro, you just tried to kill this guy, and now you're accepting his help? Like, I just didn't understand that. But yeah, Jamie Foxx as Electro gets disabled. Lizard turns human again. Sandman turns human. Doc Ock has been healed, early on. And now we're just missing the Green Goblin. So after all the villains are healed, Goblin comes in. He's like, can Spider-Man come out to play? And then he starts attacking everybody. And then eventually, they disable him. And there's this one fight, this one-on-one fight between Peter and Goblin at the end. And Peter's just wailing on Goblin. Like, he wants revenge. Like, he's just beating the shit out of him. And it was a pretty intense fight. The only negative thing I can think about it is that the editing was really choppy. Because it's like, I can understand. William Dafoe is probably, 60, 70 years old. And Tom Holland, he's fairly young. He's probably, in his 20s. So I can understand, the director or the studio not really being like, hey, let's have, a fight where it's completely seamless and, we can see everything that's happening. Usually with people who are older or younger or have no fighting experience, they try to edit around that to make it look more believable. But with this, it was so choppy, though. It was like, it kind of took me out of the movie, and it took away the intensity of the situation, because it's like, you feel for Peter in his revenge quest. You're like, he wants to get revenge for the man who killed his aunt. So he's fighting him, and he's letting out all of his rage. But then at the same time, the editing is so choppy to where it just emotionally takes the weight out of it. Because it's just so choppy to where it just feels disorienting. To where it gives me a headache, because there's just so many cuts. To the point where I was just like, this could have way more emotional weight attached to it. But then they do show this one shot in the fight where there's this wide shot where you see everything that's happening. You can see the landscape, you can see the two opponents fighting each other, and it's crystal clear. Like there's this shot where Spider-Man does this flip and he drops Green Goblin on his, on his face and everything, and I'm like, why didn't they just shoot it like that? Even though it's probably CGI and you don't get to see William Dafoe's face because it's probably a stunt double, but whatever. But it's just it was just a little choppy for me, and it kind of took the emotional weight out of it. But I still felt it. So then, as Peter's about to go for the final killing blow, he grabs Goblin's glider, and he's about to penetrate Goblin with. He's about to go for the killing strike. He's about to kill this guy. And then the two Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, look at each other, and I'm like, what are you guys gonna do? And as soon as Peter's about to go for the killing blow, that's when Tobey Maguire comes in and he blocks it. And he's just like, holding him, trying to keep him from killing Goblin. And then Goblin comes in and stabs Tobey in the back. And I was shocked. I was like, oh no, they're about to kill him. But this is kind of odd though. It was like, oh, what the hell is Andrew Garfield doing up there this entire time? And then so, Goblin, Tobey Maguire falls to the ground. And then Andrew Garfield throws the antidote at the MCU Peter, and he grabs it and he gives the antidote to Goblin, and Goblin turns to normal again. And but there was this one moment before that where during the action that was very intense, where MJ and Ned, they open this portal to get the box that has the killing switch on it, the killing trigger. And they can't close the portal. And then the Lizard sees the portal and he's about to attack them. And then the MCU Peter comes in and tries to rescue them. And then MJ falls off of the edge of the platform. And then she's falling backwards, and it's reminiscent of how Andrew Garfield lost Gwen Stacy. Because if you've seen The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Gwen Stacy was attacked by Goblin, and she was falling to her death. And then Peter did everything he could to try and save her, but she ended up cracking her head on the ground and she died. And so when Andrew Garfield mentions that, hey, I lost, Gwen Stacy, there's a lot of emotional weight to that. So then they bring that back in here where, Peter's MJ's about to die. She falls off the edge and she's falling. And then Tom Holland, he's trying to grab her and he's reaching out to her. But then the glider comes in and it blocks him. So it's like, oh shit, she's about to die. And then Andrew Garfield comes in and he rescues her. And everyone in the theater, including myself, clapped at that moment, because it's like I said, if you think about The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and how he lost Gwen Stacy in the same manner that MJ was about to die in, but this time he was able to save her, so it's like, even though he lost his, the love of his life, it's like he was still able to save someone else's girlfriend in the same situation, so it's nice that he was able to redeem himself in some way, shape, or form. He was able to get that back, like to be able to save somebody. So like at the end, like for me, there's a lot of emotional weight attached to this. And then so, after the Goblin fight, Tobey Maguire gets stabbed and, they cure him. And then, Doctor Strange comes back and he opens the portal, and then everyone goes back to their realities. And the ending to this movie is sad. The ending made me cry, because it's like, yeah, Peter never gets to live a happy life. Even though he's the protector, of the city, he never gets to live a normal, happy life, because at the very end of the movie, he's just like, because Doctor Strange, he's like, all of these other creatures are coming from the multiverse because, they're coming after you. And then so Peter's like, okay, we can stop this just if you cast that spell to make everyone forget that I'm Peter. Like, make everyone forget that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. And then Doctor Strange is like, well, if we cast that spell, I'll forget that you're Peter. Your girlfriend will forget you. Your best friend will forget you. Everybody will forget you. And he's just like, if that's the way it has to be, that's the way it has to be. And then so Doctor Strange is like, you better say your goodbyes. And then there's this running gag in the movie where Doctor Strange tells Peter, he's like, yeah, don't call me Doctor Strange, don't call me Doctor Strange. And then Peter calls Doctor Strange Steven. He's like, it just feels that doesn't feel right. And then at the end, Doctor Strange is like, yeah, call me Steven. And then Peter's like, okay, Steven. And then Steven's like, no, it still doesn't feel right. So it's pretty funny. But then he's like, you better say your last goodbyes to your friends. So then he goes to his friend Ned and MJ. And it made me cry, man, because then he kisses MJ. Because I felt their relationship. Like, their relationship felt real. He kisses MJ and he's just like, you're going to forget about me. And she's like, what do you mean? And he's just like, Doctor Strange is casting this spell. This is the only way, these creatures can stop coming into our reality and tearing up everything. So he has to cast a spell to where you're going to forget about me. And then Peter's like, I'll find you and I'll try to remind you of who I am. And MJ's like, I'll never forget you. And then Ned, he's just like, oh, you're my friend and I'll never forget you and blah, blah, blah. And then so, they go their separate ways after the touching moment, and then the spell is cast. Nobody remembers that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. No one even knows who Peter Parker is anymore. He doesn't exist. He's a ghost now. No one recognizes him. So there's this one touching scene at the end where Peter goes to the diner that they were at earlier in the film where MJ works, and he goes in there and he has this note prepared. He's like, hey, MJ, I'm Spider-Man, blah, blah, blah. So he's trying to gear himself up to present himself to MJ. And he goes in there, and MJ doesn't even recognize him. It's heartbreaking. She doesn't even know who he is. She waves at Peter, but he doesn't know that Ned's right behind him, so she's actually waving at Ned. Then Ned comes in, and MJ and Ned know each other, but they don't remember Peter. And then MJ's like, can I help you? And then he gets a cup of coffee, and he's still trying to gear himself up to read the note to her, but he just can't stomach it. So then eventually he, in my mind, I was thinking, you know what? Just have this work out over time. It's kind of like Adam Sandler in that 50 First Dates movie, where it's like, the woman's not going to remember who you are, but at the same time, it's like, if you create enough beautiful moments and just let this happen over time, then maybe eventually you'll be able to create something new and also be able to get back what you lost. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. It's like, just give it some time, and you probably can get into a relationship again. But it's kind of sad though, because she doesn't remember. They've been through all this stuff and she doesn't remember who he is. So then he's staring at her. She gives him the coffee, and she's like, is there anything else? And he's just like, no. And there's this other great one-liner in the movie that MJ says throughout the entire thing, where when they were talking about MIT, and at the end, she's just like, if you prepare yourself for disappointment, then you won't be disappointed. It's like she's kind of like, mentally like, hey, if I just prepare myself, then I won't be able to feel that disappointment. And so she says that again to Peter at the end, and he finishes her sentence to build that little connection. So they do that. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, there's a shred of light, there's a shred of hope that he can get back with the woman, that he loves. And then as she peels back her hair, you see a Band-Aid on the top of her head. And then Peter, he looks at her with this facial expression. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh shit, it's basically one of those situations where it's like, if I get you involved in my life again, you're going to get hurt. Basically that's the running theme throughout the Spider-Man movies, where it's like Spider-Man can never get what he wants. It's like, he wants to be a normal teenager. He wants to have a normal life. He wants to be in love and just, do teenage things, but he can't do that because with great power comes great responsibility. So it means that he can't live a normal life because it's just impossible for him with who he is. So when I saw that moment where he saw the Band-Aid on MJ's head, it made me think in my mind that Peter was like, oh shit, it's like, I caused that pain. I caused that injury. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have that injury, So in the back of my mind, I was like, is he going to go for it and continue, to try and have MJ remember who he is? Or is he just going to let it go because he doesn't want to, he loves her too much to the point where he doesn't want to see her get hurt? So I was just like, man, it's a huge moral dilemma, you know. So just the emotional weight at a certain point in the movie throughout the end was just fantastic. So then he leaves the diner, you know, not getting what he wants. And then he goes, and then it's just another emotional beat because then he goes to Aunt May's grave and he's grieving. And then Happy Hogan shows up and Happy Hogan doesn't even remember who Peter is. He's like, oh, did you know her? And he's like, yeah, I knew her. So then it's like, he can't be with his girlfriend. He can't go to college. He can't be with his best friend. You know, no one knows who he is. He lost his aunt. You know, it's like everything is just bad in his life. You know, it's like what's going on here? You know, it's really sad. And then at the very end, he goes to this. He lives in this crappy apartment. He just goes to. It looks like a shithole. He goes in this apartment, and then the one thing that confused me is that when he put down his moving packages, he put down this box. He opened the lid and it said GED on it. So I'm like, did he graduate high school or did he not graduate high school? I was confused. I don't know what exact. I guess he didn't graduate high school because no one knows who he is. So then it's like his life is terrible. His life, it's like he saved the world, dude. He saved the multi-dimension. He saved all these people, and he didn't have to do that, but he did it because he's a good person. But at the same time, even though he did all of these things, no one knows it, and yet he can't even be with the woman that he loves. And then his aunt got killed, and it's like he can't go to college, he can't be with his best friend, he can't have a normal life, you know. But the beauty of it all, the silver lining in all of this, is that at the very end, even though all of this terrible stuff just happened to him, and it's emotionally heavy, like that's when reality sinks in, where it's like, damn, man, like your life is horrible. But at the same time, the beauty of it all, he creates this new Spider-Man suit, which looks epic. It looks mwah, it looks amazing. He creates this new suit, and it's snowing. I guess it's Christmas time. It's snowing, and then he turns on his police scanner, and he's hearing, you know, distress calls, and he goes out there and he serves the community. And then there's the close-up shot of this mug that he got, you know, when he went to go visit MJ. It says, "We are happy to serve you." And so he flies out the window and he's just gliding across the snow. It's a beautiful visual shot where he's just gliding across, you know, the landscape and the snow. And it's like, it's heartbreaking and sad, but it gives you a shred of hope at the same time. It's like there's a happiness to it, but there's also a sadness. Because you know the reality, it's like I said, he lost everything. He has nothing. He lost everybody. No one knows who he is. He has nothing. But at the same time, it doesn't matter because he's still your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's still going to go out there and do the right thing. You know, he's still going to go out there and protect and serve the people, even though they may not know who he is. And no one's, you know, going to acknowledge him. But it's like, it's beautiful. It's like poetic. It's sad and it's beautiful at the same time. And I love the ending. Like the ending, it's so sad when you really think about it, but it's beautiful. Like there's that silver lining, whereas there's still that shred of hope, even though everything is a disaster, you know. So I feel like with this movie, with Spider-Man No Way Home, it's like it's an action spectacle. It brings in all of these old villains and characters from every single Spider-Man movie. So basically, like I said, this is the live-action version of Into the Spider-Verse. But at the same time, it tells a story. It tells a really grounded story that has a lot of emotional weight to it and a lot of heart to it, a lot of emotional depth to it. And that's what I love in movies, is when they not only give you that action roller coaster spectacle, but they give you this emotional gravitas where it's like they make, like, I was crying buckets, man. Like there were tears pouring down my face during all of these moments, like when Aunt May died, and then when Andrew Garfield was talking about how he lost Gwen Stacy, and then when he got his redemption moment, you know, I thought that was great. And then, you know, at the very end when Peter has lost everything, but yet he still is the good person, you know, he still is not going to give up the fight, you know, like I thought that was fantastic. So I feel like this movie even though it's a comic book movie, there's still a lot of reality in it. There's a lot like just basically dealing with death, where it's just they talk about everyone that they've lost and how they deal with that and how they come together, and have that bonding moment, and then when Peter wanting his revenge, and then Tobey Maguire not letting him do that, and then Peter learning to cope with all of this loss, and I just thought that was very beautiful. Like that was very it was a very beautifully executed moment within the film. And so it's just like everything in this movie, from like the acting to the directing to the soundtrack to the score to the the just the emotional weight of it, to everything, the spectacle, action, roller coaster, everything, all of it, I thought was just expertly crafted. Like, this is an expertly crafted movie. Like, it was handled with care. This is like for me, this is one of the greatest MCU movies. Like, if I had to, off the top of my head, ranking the MCU movies from greatest to least, I would say my favorite MCU movie is Infinity War. And then after that would be No Way Home. Like, for me, No Way Home is just as good as Infinity War, because it's, there's a lot going for it. A lot of emotional weight attached to it. So I'd say, yeah, No Way Home. So Infinity War, No Way Home, the first Iron Man movie, and then Civil War, and then Black Panther. That's how I look at it. But yeah, No Way Home, man, I was shocked. Like, I went into it with, like, not low expectations. I went into it like, I went into it with an open mind. I wasn't expecting much. I was just like, okay, yeah, nostalgia. You bring all these characters back. Okay, it's gonna be fun. But man, I did not expect the emotional weight. Like, just the emotion that is attached to this. Like, it gets dark, man. Like, I thought like this was like the one of the darkest MCU movies. Like, they didn't hold any punches, man. They didn't hold any punches. Like, it gets dark, man. Like, I was like, and then the ending is kind of, like I said, it's kind of sad, but it's like, hey, there's still hope, So I was just like, man, I love this movie, man. Like, holy, like, like, I cried full tears, man. Like, I felt every single emotion, everything, like the emotional weight and just everything. Like, it is a great movie. I love it. Yeah, man. This, to me, is one of the greatest Spider-Man movies. I love No Way Home. That's all I have to say.